Well, hello, everybody. We are back again for another Other Ink Thursday, continuing my series or of talking to people who've made solo games. I have Jacqueline Bryk here,
Hello.
LARPwright and solo designer. Sorry, I cut you off. Jacqueline, say hello.
Hi, it's me. I'm also a tabletop designer, author, editor, general doer of things in the analog game space.
Did I say graphic designer? I may have spoken out of, I
I'm
meant
not
to
a
say
graphic
game
designer.
designer. I
I'm
can't
not
even remember what I said.
I'm not a
Um,
graphic designer.
yeah,
You said LARP designer, you said LARPwright and solo game designer. I'm not a
solo
graphic
game design.
designer.
Okay, I thought I had said the wrong word. I'm glad.
No. I am not
Uh,
a visual spatial relations person. If you ask me to rotate an apple in my head, I'm not going to be able to do it.
oh wow. That's so weird. I mean, obviously
Right.
people's different brains are amazing. They come in all shapes. Um, wow. Oh,
I mean, I
th-
can think in like still lives and I could
yeah.
think in like flashes of movement and words, but you try and you're like, I need you to envision a thing in a space, and I'm like, then I just immediately forget how 3D space works.
How I mean, so this is we're already off the rails now because like I'm like,
Yeah.
do you how do you design because so much I mean, do you design LARP? I haven't read all of your LARPs, but like that's a lot of like people moving in space, right?
hmm
Is that a challenge then to do that, or does it work when you do it that way because it's other people have to figure out how they move?
It helps when I have a space to look at because if I'm
Mm,
not like in the space, I'm not really processing the space like someone who has a better sense of visual spatial relations. But if I am given a general idea of the space's setup, I can sort of like if I have one room in a closet, as I do at Intercon for one of my most popular convention LARPs, um, I can make a cyberpunk, what was it described as? Cyber Baroque end stage capitalism misery engine LARP happen in that room and that closet and make it feel bigger than the space it is actually in because what you're actually processing, in my experience, is the emotions of the people in the LARP. The space is there to sort of lend a hand to those
yeah.
emotions. But I tend to write LARPs that can be played in chamber spaces because I it's easier to be like, okay, I have this black box and I'm going to design for a certain amount of theater of the mind in this black box.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes
hmm
sense. I I'm so we're already talking about LARP design.
hmm
Is that where you started in games, or is that like did was there a I don't even know. Is I tell me about it. How did you become a person who
So
made games?
that's kind of a tricky question because I actually started gaming as a hobby when I was 6 years old. I played D&D with my dad. My dad would run me little D&D games. And then I got into Boffer contact sports with Dagger Hero. I will not deign to call Dagger Hero LARP. But I got into LARPing from there when I started trying out different games that actually involved, the role play part of live action role play. When I was like 16 or 17, and I'm 31 now. So I've been gaming for, we'll say, a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I didn't really write. I didn't really start writing anything, but the first thing I did write professionally was a LARP. And I believe that was in 2013. And that was a little chamber LARP called the Paradise Machine because up until that point, I was of the opinion that like LARPs all had to have big numbers and character sheets and things of that nature. And I was introduced to more freeform gaming, more lit form gaming. And that is a space in which I feel I can move more freely. So I designed my first LARP, which is a very weird, Gnostic, God bothering LARP for
Bothering.
12 for 11 people called the Paradise Machine, which was about a machine that can give a person the power of a god, but once the gods realized this, the prime directive kicked in and they abandoned humanity. So now 11 of the most powerful people on Earth have to figure out what they're going to do about that. And my LARPs have changed over the years, because I realize there's so much I can do in this space that I like. I really like exploring the opportunities that are put in front of me. I professionally started designing tabletop games, and I didn't really have a lot in the tabletop design space before this, but I professionally just started designing tabletop games in 2017, when I was pulled on to the book Half Damned by Onyx Path, which is about ghouls for Vampire the Requiem second edition. And then I was immediately put on my dream project, which was Changeling the Lost second edition, and have continued to design since.
Yeah. I'm not surprised to hear that of all the World of Darkness, Changeling is the one that
Mm-hmm.
you resonate with a lot.
Yeah, Changeling the Lost saved my life in college, so I'm a huge fan.
Well, there you go. That's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I my first response is like the it's like the life debt thing, like Chewie or whatever, like you saved my life, therefore I will be your
Basically,
co-pilot
yeah.
forever.
Yeah. I have written on every Changeling the Lost second edition book that has come out from Onyx Path, except for the novella. So,
Right. That's I don't I've played Changeling one time and
hmm
I don't even know what edition it was. So I will have to go dig up my, PDF that I used and see
well, you
if your name
should.
is in the credits.
It will probably be the first or second name in the credits. So,
Right, right. Well, that's amazing. So, I mean, that's like, starting at such a young age in games is sort of like it makes sense that you become a creator eventually. I mean, not everyone that plays has to
hmm
become a creator, but it's so
right.
common. And I guess with like starting, I don't know, is LARP like, is there more player, like putting it on the players to like come up with their own content sometimes? Like I know, like I've done like a dinner murder mystery thing where you get your
Fun.
1 page backstory or whatever, and it's like it's all given to me. But I
hmm
imagine if you're doing like boffer stuff and out in the woods and like you doing it over the course of 10 years, you're like invited to create a lot of your own relationships and character motivations and stuff like that. So did that lead naturally into when you're writing motivations and content and character stuff for
Yeah, I
like
think so. I've described so I'm one of those people who like has tried to write a novel and failed several times. And I realized that what I enjoy most is setting up dominoes for other people to knock
mm,
down. I'm not really interested in controlling all of the characters in my space because either I make it too easy on them or I just can't figure out a way to get them out of a situation and it's really stressful for me and I just end up abandoning the project altogether. But when I have, I don't know, 30 some odd characters, which I think is no, 45 I think is the biggest LARP I've ever run.
wow.
But when I have something like 30 to 45 odd characters, each with their own motivations and their own ways of interacting with both the physical and social space, then I can just set up their conflicts and turn them loose on each other and they'll figure out the game for themselves. I don't have to do shit except for be there if someone has a question or needs a minute.
Yeah, yeah. I I do like that. I mean, I have the only novels I've done are like the NaNoWriMo thing where you
Mhm.
smash through a first draft very quickly.
Mhm.
But I also find that I enjoy like much more like, and then this guy knows this person, and then she's over here doing this thing. And if he ever
Yep.
finds out that she knows this thing, it'll be whoa, but like I'm not going to
Yep.
tell you whether they do or not. You decide as the players.
Yep.
I really enjoy that as well.
Mhm.
Um, so that sort of like I don't have a smooth transition to my next question, but like I guess I wanted to talk to you primarily because I mean, you're pretty awesome. And I've only talked to you for
Oh,
like, I don't know,
thanks.
a total of 10 minutes previous. No, we did
Mm,
that one, we did that panel together. So like
we
less
did.
than an hour total that I've talked to you over the like couple of years that I've known you.
Right.
So talking to you more is nice, but also
Oh, thanks.
specifically, you did this LARP the last when we were on that panel. You mentioned you had done a solo game, and I was playing solo games all through 2023, and
Hmm.
so I played yours, and I really liked it, and I want to talk about it. But
Okay. Would you like to introduce the solo game or should I?
either way, but I wanted to. I have this habit of like saying that I'm going to talk about a thing and then backing up and talking about something else.
Okay.
So is do you play so did you play solo games or before you made them, or did you sort of like just try it out as like a new thing to do?
So I was not aware of solo games until the pandemic. Like I knew about
Mm,
1,000-Year-Old Vampire, but to be honest, I'm kind of burned out on vampires, so it's not really something I played. Um, but then like my friend Kiana Shaw, who's awesome, designed several solo games that were really cool. And my friend Vivian Grimm held a pandemic Halloween celebration on Discord, which was like every day during the month of October, you do a different spooky thing. And one of the options was you play one of these three solo games. And the solo game that really got me into the medium, or I guess the solo game that got me into solo games,
yeah,
was God Talk or Nobody, which is free on itch, and it is a game about being a disenfranchised wanderer in the 1950s, hearing the voice of God. And it is your job to bring the voice of God to other people, except it's not, the God of the Christian 1950s. So you're dealing with that while you're also dealing with essentially being a mad prophet. Um, it's an incredible little game. You can get it for free on itch.io. I believe it's also linked in several of my solo game pages because I always credit it as the game that got me into solo games. Um, and I played that one. I'm like, I need to write something like this. This is amazing. I love how this makes me feel. I love that it feels like a choose your own adventure novel,
mm,
except you are more invested in what happened. Well, more invested isn't really the word I'm looking for. You're more, what happens depends more on you than like it might in a choose your own adventure novel because you're adding your own personal
right,
baggage and style and unique flair to it. Much like playing a LARP is going to differ significantly from playing an MMO because with an MMO, you're playing it through a certain filter and there's only so many choices you can make because digital choices and human choices are very far apart on the scale of messy to clean. Um,
sure,
and I like the messiness and the ambiguity and the, well, what if I did the same thing twice, but the second time I did it through this lens rather than through this other lens, and how that fundamentally changes what you're doing, even if you're doing the same thing. Um, and I wrote my first solo game, want to say it was 20, the end of 2021, called Scare B&B, and it's about being a ghost in a bed and breakfast. And Halloween's coming and weird stuff is happening around the bed and breakfast, and like maybe you're familiar with the people who come around Halloween, maybe you're not. Maybe you know about the spooky stuff happening, maybe you don't. Maybe this is normal, maybe it's not, but it's very much this homey supernatural game based on, again, God Talk or Nobody, but also based on Our Haunt by Raina Djati, and based on my own love of haunted house stories. And there's not a lot of haunted house stories where you get to see the house from inside. Like,
mm,
you get to see it from the perspective of someone who interacts with it, but you don't get to see, like, the domesticity of the haunted house. So, like, that's kind of what I was
like
aiming for with that one. And from there, I just, you know,
make games.
yeah, it just makes solo games now.
Uh,
Apparently.
well, we can talk some more about some of your other ones in a little while, but
Okay.
I want to. You asked me if I wanted to set it up. This game that I played first, the first of yours that I played,
Hmm.
is called um, "I Have No Railgun and I Must Scream."
Sure is, isn't it?
Sure is, and it is. I mean, you yeah, stop me if you want to interject in here, but
No, go
I've
ahead.
been excited about the game. It's such a to me it's such a great concept. I've not encountered it's one I haven't encountered before. Obviously, the back of house for ghosts. I've not encountered that either. That sounds great. But it's basically like the high level pitch is it's one of those anime where like teens are put in giant robots and told to fight monsters, but you're not playing one of those teens. You're playing the sibling of one of those teens, and
Yep.
you're like at home, and you're writing in your journal about the front, but you're not at the front. You're distant, and that's the thing that. And this is something you said earlier, like the thing about like the balance between like having enough the prompts give you enough to write about, but leave a lot of room for you to write a lot of details that are your
Yeah.
like that. Having played a bunch in 20 last year, um, that was why I discovered that I enjoyed the ones I enjoyed the most were like
Hmm.
that the because I mean obviously there's lots of different ones, but I think yours hit exactly where I live apparently in this,
Aw.
and the way that the system the way that you have like a D20, and those are the neighborhood prompts. And I'm telling
Hmm.
you about your game. And this is for the
Yes, but
audience,
we're also
right?
telling everyone about my game, so
Um,
please.
uh,
I like seeing how other people perceive my game, so please continue.
so it's D20 is the neighborhood things, the local things that are like going to keep happening because every time you sit down to do one of the days in the journal, you draw a card from a deck of 52 cards or 50. Well, at some point you mix in the jokers, so that's like 54 cards,
Hmm.
but that's like the big news from the front. Like it's politics stuff. It's like the battles of the monsters versus the giant robots. It's the like new in technology is being made up, to fight the war. And it's very distant stuff. And there's 54 different ones.
Hmm.
But then there's like, oh, it's like high school drama. It's like dad is having a fight with mom in the kitchen again because you could keep rolling the 17 or whichever number it is.
Hmm.
There's like a bunch of smaller scale stuff that's going to keep happening at the same time that like all this like very big world stuff is happening. And I found that interlocking interplay between those two things to be particularly compelling.
Thank you.
So well done. Thank you. That's really what I'm here to tell you, that you've made a great game.
Thank you.
But I don't know. I think that was really great. And I think what you said earlier about, yeah, like having like you revisit the same thing and you do it in a different way, and or
Hmm.
you have the um I don't know, there's sort of an overarching plot to the game. It's very loose, you get to make
Hmm.
it up basically based on the face cards. It's very loose structure as far as like an overarching thing. um but I don't know. Anyway, I thought it was great, and and so I want you to tell us more about the design or what you were trying to do with it, or like anything else. Talk about your game because I've praised it a lot, but tell us more. Tell me more. I'm curious.
So, once upon a time, I played a little game called 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, which is sorry about the light change on my end. Um,
You're good.
13 Sentinels Aegis Rim is an otome game, but it is also a strategic mecha game, but it is also a time traveling space opera, high school drama. It's a lot of different genres at once, and it all comes to make sense in the end. But something we see a lot is the interplay of the 11 main characters of the 13, because we don't get to play the other two, but the other 11 are playable. Um, and you sort of see these characters as background characters in other people's stories. You see NPCs who remain NPCs throughout the entire thing. And you just see how this world is shaped by the people involved in it. And there's so much going on in this mech war, but also like the mech war is happening in a very populated city. So like you're seeing the high school interludes in between the actual battles. You're seeing one of the characters die to become a friendly little robot in someone else's timeline. Like there's a lot of stuff going on. And I wanted to explore because like it eventually does become like an epic world-saving drama, right? And that's usually around the time I start to lose interest because I'm really interested in stuff that happens at ground level. And I think the pandemic really drove that home for me because I remember when in between we'd gotten in a fight with our landlord in 2020 for reasons I don't remember why. He's a landlord, whatever. Um and COVID had killed something like 80,000 people in the US at this point, and it was also like spring or summer. And I'm driving home and I drive through this street full of dogwoods, right? And it's beautiful and the sun is out and the birds are singing and it's like a perfect 70-degree day. I go home and I go to my husband. I'm like, why doesn't it look like the apocalypse?
Hmm.
This is not fair. This feels weird and uncomfortable because it's really beautiful outside and like I could just go outside and have a beer and not worry about anything, and there are people dying in droves around me. Like this is unfair. Why is this like this? And that tension is really interesting to me because we're so accustomed to these very like brown and black and gray and firelit we're very used to these Mad Max looking
Hmm.
apocalypses, right?
Yeah, the
And
road and all of them.
yeah,
The the one with Will Smith that I can't think of the name of.
I Am Legend.
That's the one.
Yeah. And like there's just this very like industrial and like I'm sure in some places it did look like that. I live in Delaware. I live in the suburbs of Delaware. So it doesn't, it's not looking super industrial new metal post-apocalyptic wasteland over here, right?
Right.
But that vision of normalcy during a world-shattering event just feels so weird, but that makes it a really healthy and interesting space to explore in gaming because you have the built-in tension already. And yeah, like you're in a war or you're in a pandemic or you're in an ice age or whatever, you still gotta make dinner.
Hmm.
You
Right.
still if you have kids, you still have to make sure the kids are safe and educated and at least marginally happy.
Yeah.
Like you still have to continue on with the business of living even as the world is falling down around you, and that is particularly interesting to me.
Well, so and that is, I mean, it is an interesting place, you know, thing to explore, right? To
Hmm.
gamify or not to gamify, but to like open up an avenue to capture that feeling.
Hmm.
I mean,
I think
yeah,
explore is a good word for it because
yeah,
I also don't necessarily disagree with you that gamify is the incorrect term here because
yeah.
I am turning it into a specific lens with which to explore and with which to get a certain amount of dopamine reward for like rolling an interesting uh event while pulling an interesting event from the card pile. Like there are some real weird matchups you can get there. Like the
Right.
one where there's a pilot who dies in the cockpit and at the same day your parent gets called up for mandatory your parent gets drafted. Like
Sure.
that's
That would
always a fun one.
that would hit
Um
in a certain way.
but also like when ash falls from the sky and your character's like maybe you could make an ash man, and mixing that with like one of the more weird, benign headlines, like farmers mad they can't hold state fair this year.
Yeah. Right. I mean, right. I think that, yeah, it's so those I don't know how many combinations it is, the D20 and
There's a
the
lot.
deck of cards, but it's a lot of different ones and
Mhm.
yeah, to match up those different ones because I don't remember the game perfectly and I don't remember every prompt, but like I
I
remember that
mean, I wrote it. I don't remember the game perfectly, so it's cool.
there was a lot of stuff that was
Yeah.
it's mundane. I mean, it's like and like businesses are announcing that they've got new things that they're doing or what I don't know, art show is canceled or whatever. I mean, there's like
There's
just
an
normal,
industrial sabotage one, I think.
yeah. And like, is this the war or is it not? And that's where to go back to like the experience of journaling it and like why I have really been excited about solo games is that you can explain like, is it all connected to the war? Is it all like,
Hmm.
somebody's trying to like get using the war as an opportunity to do the industrial sabotage so that they can get a higher stock market price, or even you could invent all that. That's not in the
Yep.
prompt. Or you could say that it's completely unconnected and you could take it in like a, oh, this is, I mean, you could put a lot of layers on it. I mean, obviously you're supposed to play a teen, so like teens are not necessarily going to be as involved in like organizing a workers a protest or something like that.
Hmm. I mean, they
Uh
can be, but
they can be and certainly have been activists
hmm.
and remain activists in all kinds of places, but I mean,
True.
if you wanted to take it like in that direction, right, again, it's not in the prompt, but like if that's the story that you want to tell about the war as the catalyst for the your character's awakening to like some of the grinding of the gears that the machinery of war is having on the people,
Hmm.
like, you could take it in that way.
Yeah,
There's so
absolutely.
much room to explore those things, or anyway, it's great. And
Yeah. Um, one of my friends came up with the really off the wall, but I really liked it, idea of playing the game and discovering that you are the AI that's running a war simulation through the game.
that's a good difference,
Yeah.
different
And like
solution.
the prompts don't not support that.
Right. Yeah. And I think, so I don't, it's not a spoiler, right, because my game would be different from anyone
Oh
else's
yeah.
that you play. So there was a thread that I picked up on the prompts. You have like the president, and then the president is like has a special mech for his daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't remember how much of that is in the prompts and how much this is what I interpreted and invented. But
No,
then
there's a
there's
couple
like,
prompts about that.
so then like my climax for the whole event, because as soon as you shuffle the jokers in, then it's like you're either going to get the one joker or the other joker, and it's either going to go
Mm-hmm.
well or bad for humanity. um
Mm-hmm.
and so I think the way it worked out for me is that basically I had the two jokers ended up somehow on the bottom on the
Oh,
deck, the
weird.
last two cards in the deck, and the good result, or the human survive result, was the top one. So by that point I had like the sibling and the daughter of the president, and like he's trying to do some weird military, it was like a military coup in reverse where like
Oh
he
wow.
tried to like take over, was using his daughter to take over the military, and then the military like had a counter coup against him and said, we're
Counter
not going
coup,
to
yeah.
listen to you. And then it ended up with like the climax is like the sibling and the daughter of the president unite to defeat the final. I had dragons in mind. You randomly roll
Nice.
a bunch of stuff at the beginning, so I was fighting dragons, kaiju dragons, right? And so like
Nice.
they unite together and their combined forces defeat the dragons and save humanity, and their melted mechs remain in the middle of the city as like a
Oh
memorial
wow,
forever and
okay.
forever, right? um right, so it's like that was the result that I got, and it was like it was
Mm.
great, and I brought in all of this stuff, and like that the president didn't get what he wanted, because, well, he did kind of, because his daughter gets to be the heroic sacrifice or whatever, and I guess he gets reelected, I don't know, but like that doesn't matter, he doesn't. But anyway, that is just what happened in my story. But I liked, again, that your prompts had such like political views mixed in.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just a it wasn't just about my touchstone for this, obviously, or not obviously, but like my main touchstone for this is Evangelion, Neon
Mm-hmm.
Genesis Evangelion. And that city is like devoid of people. There's no like
Yeah.
local politics in Tokyo 3. And well, if there is, it's the story's not about that. And like you
Right.
get nebulous hints of like, the UN is doing stuff. And if you the more you've seen of it, the more the UN subplot plays in. But
I hope
it's
the
not
Cruel
really
Angel got its doctorate. You know, it had to defend its thesis,
uh
the Cruel Angel
I
thesis.
thank you for explaining it just a little bit. I was not sure what you were putting down. That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Sorry.
Um but the city, so my point is that the city, it's really just focused on the teens fighting the robots. I mean, there's no
Right.
global politics, there's no local politics, there's no like it's not explored in the show. I mean, it's there in the background. So I really enjoy bringing that forward, where it's like, well, of course, like every war we've ever had, like is an opportunity for politicians to grandstand
Oh
and
yeah,
like
100%.
like that's going to become part of the story, or scientists to invent new weapons, or for
Hmm.
military people to become heroes. And like you made it like a real war and
Yeah.
not like this thing. So I don't know, I just, again, congratulating you on like bringing
Ah,
in all
thank
this
you.
stuff and like uh
One of
made
the
it such
things
a
that
dramatic.
irritates me most about media is when media that is very thoughtful about its characters starts turning the world into cardboard.
Hmm.
Like I was very on board with the Handmaid's Tale show for a solid 3 seasons. Like even after most people had been like, I'm not really sure I'm into this anymore. And I was like, no, 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 it's fine. It like the first 2 seasons were amazing. It was super good. I'm not gonna. And then it just turned into like a series of like weird escalating punishments at black sites that we never see again, and like characters who they just couldn't think of anything to do with get shoved off buildings or run over by trains. And like I argued about um God, what the hell's the name of that actress?
I know almost nothing about that show other than that it
Elizabeth,
exists, so I can't help.
the main character. Like I argued very strongly against her having plot armor because like no, she doesn't have plot armor. Like she's fine. She's a good character, whatever. And like the reason she seems to be surviving more than everyone else is because the whole thing is we're supposed to be hearing her story. And then like they started doing this thing which was like, oh, she's bouncing back and forth between Canada and the US, and she gets put into a different household, and like there's just long lingering shots of people's faces, and there's just a lot of stuff really didn't start to make sense, and it very much became sensationalizing of the dystopia rather than actually sticking to the rules of the dystopia as written.
Hmm.
Because if you stick to the rules of the dystopia as written, then you can't shock the audience. Or I guess that Elizabeth Moss, that's her name.
Hmm.
I guess that's what Liz Moss and the rest of the team thought, is that you like can't like Game of Thrones shock the audience if you realize that if this person does X, then they're gonna have their hand cut off, or they're gonna get whipped or whatever. And the thing about The Handmaid's Tale, and I promise this ties back, the thing about
Oh.
The Handmaid's Tale is that it is about daily living. It is
Hmm.
about the daily miseries of living in a Christo-fascist state. It is about the small things people do to survive or to be unnoticed or to rebel. It is consistent and thorough and thoughtful. And like, yeah, it's fiction, and so it has its own problems, but the thing is, in the first season of the show and in the book, there's a one-to-one correlation of if you get caught doing X, Y happens to you. If you get caught doing X a second time, you're probably gonna die. Like, and that just was abandoned in favor of, oh, character does X. let's bring in a new weird form of torture that we can put on screen. And it was just very irritating because it didn't feel like a dystopia anymore. It
Mm,
just felt like the producers expected me to go, oh my goodness, the Christo-fascists are so terrible.
it's
And
do
like,
do deca double secret probation.
yeah, and I don't know why they brought in like this massive monolithic black site in like season 4 that was like, I don't know, 30 stories tall and had like a helipad on the top and looked like the freaking monolith from 2001 A Space Odyssey, but as a building and had like secret garage. And like, you successfully accomplished torture sites, and put a pin in that because I have feelings about torturing games. But you successfully accomplished torture sites in schools and in hospitals in both the original narrative and the first couple of seasons. Why did you feel the need to bring in a fortress of evil?
You got to escalate. Everything's got to
And
get bigger.
you don't have to escalate because the thing is, the,
No, I mean,
the,
I don't
the
believe that either, but something, that's
yeah,
the thing. It's like you have
it
to,
just
it's
goes into this. It's like this bullshit Jack Bauer storytelling. Like, oh well, you saved your daughter, now you have to save the president's daughter, now you have to save the US, now you have to save the world. Where do you go from there? And it's just so boring. Because after a while, it's just like, why?
join the Green Lantern Corps and go save whole planets or
Mm,
whole galaxies, I guess.
clearly. But see, that story already takes place on that level, and it is also a reason why I don't read the Green Lantern Corps, because I'm not particularly interested in stories like that.
Yeah.
But on a similar power level, you know what story I love is the Chronicles of Amber, because these people we're like godlike creatures who can move through um realities at will and like can change and reshape those realities, but the story's not about that. The story is about the bullshit family drama as they go through a succession crisis. And it's so good.
Mm.
And like,
Yeah.
I am really interested in why humans do what they do. My degree is in international relations and like the weirdness of that.
Yeah.
And like, I'm really interested in how humans react to things. And that sounds very general, but like, in a lot of war stories or disaster stories, you'll see people like looting and like
Hmm.
robbing each other and being horrible because humans are bastards. And that's not what happens usually. Like in disaster zones, usually humans are looking for ways to help or at least make their circumstances more comfortable. But unfortunately, because of the fears of the rich, like they're like, oh my god, they're gonna take over my resources in that area, I have to send in people to protect my assets. And then it becomes not necessarily a shooting war, but it definitely becomes more hostile because now you're essentially sending in people who are serving wealth panic.
Yeah.
And to tie this all up, what I wanted to do with Railgun is again bring it back to that tension of, yeah,
Mm.
it's the apocalypse, but people are still being nice to each other, and there's still like the trees are still growing and the birds are still singing. And why doesn't it feel like the apocalypse until it does? And then, oh god, it feels like the apocalypse. I wish it didn't. Um, and sort of exploring what it means to just go about the business of being human in that
Yeah.
space and how your reactions change or are consistent. And like, oh man. Sorry, I got myself really worked up about like torture parallels in The Handmaid's Tale. And there's no torture in Railgun,
No, no.
but like, hmm.
So I I think you're talking, I think that you said it sounds facile or whatever to say like I'm interested in how humans react to stuff, but I really, that is sort of like it, it's really deeper in some respects because like I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot of games, and I think I tend to make games that are more like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if like you were in a soldier in a creepy environment, or wouldn't it
Mm-hmm.
be cool if you were a raccoon who was like having an adventure in an alley searching for trash or whatever.
I
And
mean, I like both of those ideas. Those sound
well,
great.
right, they sound great, but what neither of those ideas is like they're not primary. They're sort of about the setting. They're not about
Mm-hmm.
necessarily the character. And you can
Mm-hmm.
make that. And people, I've certainly played with people who make them more about the character, and everybody comes to games differently or stuff like that. But I think
Mm-hmm.
my first impulse is to think of a cool environment in which to
Oh.
experience an adventure or a
Mm-hmm.
game or a thing. That's sort of my default. But I think um, for you to say you're interested in humans reacting to things, and that is it's not like the opposite or whatever, but it is a different way. It's like
Yeah.
creating characters, and I think that relates to all the stuff you were talking before about your LARP experience of writing how are these characters going to interact, and talking about Amber and
Mm-hmm.
that
And
stuff like
also, I
that.
can't rotate an apple in my head, so I have to picture the characters. Full
Well,
circle, baby.
there you go, back to the start again. But I think it's great to have those different focuses, because like that's why there's itch is great. You should go on itch and you'll find 1,000 games that you could never have written them, because anyone who's watching this video, you could never have written all the games that are on there, because there's such a
True.
diversity of people who are coming things from different perspectives. And so like wrapping in that focus, and how are you going to react to this situation, and that's
Mm-hmm.
that's a great, I don't know if that's like a capstone on the conversation, but I think I really, yeah, I think that's a great way to say
Yeah.
what you've done with that game.
Thank you.
Um, all right. So I'm looking at my question sheet down here. So you you talked about you said put a pin in the torture thing, but then you said you always got worked up on it. So I don't know if you want to talk about torturing
I
games.
think that's for a later episode.
Okay, some other episode we'll have you back on. Uh
Definitely. I have many things to say about that.
uh so I so I've got so before we finally get done with and we don't have too much more time, but like, it's before we in talking about 0 day, or not 0 day war, um I have no railgun and I must scream,
I
like,
call it Railgun for short.
right, I mean that's a great shorthand.
Yep.
Uh
All of my games have nicknames.
sure, because they're your, they're your,
They're my babies.
yeah, they're your creations. You gotta
Mhm.
call them by your pet names.
Yeah, that's right.
um so this is a game that is on itch. It's a digital, it's been laid out. It's a, I don't know, 20 some page PDF. It
Hmm.
looks perfectly fine. It's perfectly playable. um and I know it was originally like a Golden Cobra submission, and
Hmm.
Golden Cobra is like, no, their whole, it's like they don't
It's
want you
stock
to do
form.
layout at all. They don't, um it's like, it's, or maybe I'm thinking of
No,
the
it's
because,
doc. The what you're looking for is the term doc form, which is literally just it is in a Word doc or a Google Doc.
yeah. So because it's like separating the game design from the layout process, it's
Hmm.
like sort of two sets of skills, and they're focused on the one, and they don't want you to spend any time on the other, I
Right.
assume, is why they do it. And
Basically,
you
yeah.
brought the same, used to do the 200 word RPG challenge, right? Weren't you
Yes, I
like
did.
part of that was the same thing. It was like, submit this as a like text file, that's
Yep.
it. um so anyway, since you have a lot of experience with that, then like, but there's also like, you go to these cons and there's like tables and tables and tables of people selling like stacks of books. Is there, where is the game, I guess, in your sort of idea? Like, is it in, and I'm sure you have opinions about this, but like, so this is why I'm asking, but like, is the game in the play? Is the game, and so anything that aids the actual play is the game, or or is the game the product that you can buy and then read and then play? But like, where
So
would
glad
you
you asked
want to
this
have
question.
a printed version of Railgun? And
I
would that increase it or its value? I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on this issue?
so Railgun. a lot of my games I really like having in zine form because I think
Mm,
zines are just such a cool art form. I love
yeah.
that you could just print them and staple them together and they're out in the world. They're very anarchic art form. Big fan, huge fan. But I also had one of my zines professionally printed recently. It's called the Pine Sorrow Collection. It's an art zine, so you could potentially put it in a game, but it unto itself is not a game. Um, I don't know what the difference between a game and a not game is. I can tell you that I have seen I love artifacts of play. I
Mm,
love books that make the layout into part of the game. Best example of this I've ever seen was Impossible Landscapes for Delta Green. But absolutely phenomenal, mind-bending layout. Absolutely beautiful character conversations from the characters in the past to the present, scattered throughout the book. You'll actually see like hints to where to go next in the book in the background. There's
mm.
like reverse text in the background of the actual text. Like there's a lot of really cool stuff
Like
that
palimpsest or like reverse, like you hold it up to the light and you read in a
like
different page.
palimpsest.
Okay.
Like the layout itself gets more weird as the campaign gets progressively more weird.
That
And that
seems
is such a
appropriate for,
cool layout choice.
yeah, yeah.
My other favorite, which I happen to have here because I am borrowing some of the techniques for a LARP I am running on or assisting in running on Saturday, is Bluebeard's Bride.
Ah,
This is the Book of Rooms. And all of their books are printed to look like storybooks, right? They're all printed in this like square leather bound format with a little bookmarker and like illustrations throughout. And that is really cool because what that does is it actually lends more to the fairy tale ambiance of
yeah,
the game. But if this if this were to just be a storybook, wouldn't be a game. Probably not.
sure.
Depends on how much it asks you to interact with the text, I think.
Hmm.
But as a constructivist in international relations, games are what we make of them.
Absolutely.
But I do love seeing cool and different things that people put in their books to make them like really fit the vibe of the game and enhance the vibe. I'm currently restarting work on a hack of Thousand-Year-Old Vampire with permission, which is a basically a romance novel builder
Nice.
solo game. Just a historical romance novel builder, and I took pictures of myself and my partner for that so that those will be part of the book. Like we just did a whole bunch of clinch cover photos that were going to be used as part of the layout.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that makes it like extra meta too. Like,
Hmm.
I'm sure intentionally, like it's not
Hmm.
lost on you that that's like a meta thing, I'm sure.
Correct.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I love seeing, I love Easter eggs. I love little in jokes, but I also love seeing how layout design can affect a game. Now, for me, as we've stated, I cannot rotate an apple in my head. I am garbage at layout, but I happen to have friends who are very good at it. So
Sure.
sometimes I will just pay people to do layout for me, and then it looks awesome.
Yeah.
And then I'm having a good time. And people like looking at my games. Like the version of Railgun that is on itch.io is a laid out full color zine. But I also link to the free version on Golden Cobra because I want people to be able to play the game for free. And if you want to buy the layout that Ross Payton did, which is it's a very nice layout,
Yeah.
you can absolutely do that. And I like having those options because like Morkborg did a very similar thing where it's just the bare bones. It's doc form, it's no layout, which honestly, thank God, because the layout of Morkborg is beautiful, but to me,
Right.
basically unreadable.
Yeah, it's a whole thing.
It's a trip, and it is meant to be a trip.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, yes, the game is what you make of it.
Sure. I did. That's great. That's great. Uh, all right. I've mentioned wanting to be respectful of your time. So is there any, before we get out of here, is there any, you mentioned a couple projects that you have kind of in the works, like stuff
Mhm.
you're working on. Is there anything that you wanna, that is anything in particular that people should check out? They've heard us talk
Yes.
about Railgun a bunch, but is there something coming soon? Something available now?
Um,
What else should people
well,
check out of
keep an eye
yours?
out for 1,000 Yards of Lace, which will be the
Thousand Yards
romantic
of
solo game.
Lace. Also an
Um,
amazing name. That's just so,
Thank
that's so
you. I'm
good.
very proud
So
of
good.
it. But the thing that I'm very proud of right now is Pine Sorrow Collection, which is my art zine in collaboration with several other queer artists and a queer layout designer. We have 22 out of 25 physically printed copies that are available for sale on Itch.io. If you buy one, you get a physical copy and you get a vintage postcard handpicked by me. And the in-universe curator of the Pine Sorrow collection will write you a note on the back of that postcard.
Nice.
So that is what I am most excited about right now.
All right. And that itch.io page is what?
It is rufflejax.itch.io. That's rufflejax.itch.io.
Awesome. Is there any other place that you would like people to follow you or find you on the internet?
You can
Uh
find me most places on the internet as Rufflejax.
awesome.
It's just a very good name. It's very easy. If you find someone named Rufflejax on the internet, it's probably me. If they don't have a good sense of style, it's not, and you should tell me immediately so I can quash them because there can only be one. Um, I am sorry we didn't get to talk about dark academia or torture, but maybe you can have me on for future episodes for that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we look, we could record a short bonus episode
Hell yeah.
and something else some other time. But I do want to thank you for your time today, talking to me about so much about, you know, this particular solo games in
Mm.
general, all of your ideas about everything. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, Jax. Thank you so much.
Absolutely my pleasure. The pleasure is all mine.
All right. And thank you everyone who's watched this video and do the things, like the video, all that stuff. Check out her HIO. It's great.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.